We're going to be talking about the statue in Charlottesville that was sort of the impetus for the protests a few years back. That statue's now being taken down, and I think there's a larger conversation that we want to have about that. But let's start off with the Sam Seder debate of the Libertarian guy from the Ayn Rand Institute. Adam, should we start with a clip? Should we just give it a little context first?
I think we can just. I feel like we can start off with the clip. Clip is pretty fun.
Okay, everybody. So we have a quick, like 1 minute, 20-second clip, and then we'll get into a discussion about that.
Okay, and I'm turning it on now.
But you know what? I also like the incentive of, in a free market, not in the world in which we live now, where everybody hides behind the government, of the insurance company that insured that building. Because they've got a lot of claims that they're going to have to pay now, and they're going to take a big hit. They, in a free market, they would have sent an inspector. Now, in the world we live in today, they don't, because they rely on the government inspector, which probably was not a good idea.
No,
because
the government inspector made it quite clear that there were problems there. The private inspector,
I'm sorry, 20 years ago when the building was built with a basis.
I'm sorry. The private inspectors also, the engineering company that was in there, the private owners of that building made the decision not to fix it. Now, were there stricter government regulations?
Then why are we worried about it? Then they made a decision and they suffered the consequences.
Because there's a hundred
people who made a decision, who made a bad decision, and suffer the consequences of it. I'm not justifying the building collapsing. I'm saying that people make decisions. If I make a decision to walk into the street without looking, should the driver be limited in his capacity to drive because I made a stupid decision? The point is that there are, what you want is for the people who make the decision to suffer, to benefit from the consequence of their actions. Oh, but you know what?
Oh God.
All right, so Adam, kick it off.
Yeah, that right there is kind of why you don't want libertarians running the government. Literally, what was his response to, 100 people died? Well, they made a stupid decision and they suffered the consequences for that action. What the
Yeah, the whole thing wasn't right. I do think he was talking about like the owners of the building and just leaving out the fact, the owner of the building lost their building and they're gonna have to suffer the consequences of not having a building anymore. When it's like, how about all like
I
the
think
people
you're being
that
too
died?
generous. You're being too generous because Sam brought that up. Sam
Oh,
said
yeah,
100 people
okay.
died. And he said that's just people
Yeah,
making
right.
bad decisions.
You're right. Yeah, so it's completely illogical. And in full disclosure, just for everyone listening, like I'm definitely not myself like the biggest like Sam Seder guy. I have pointed disagreements with him on many things, but I do like how he debates libertarians and he does a lot of good work on that issue. And I think just having this guy on here yeah, just talking about like 100 people dying, and also the fact that a business, they're gonna if they just self-regulated themselves rather than having a third party like government who is supposedly, supposed to be working for the people, they would rather have the businesses just yeah, do it themselves, police themselves on like building regulations. So I think that's just ridiculous.
And like, here's like one thing where like, I don't understand. So like, I guess like in the free market, there's more insurance or something, because what stake does the insurance company not have right now that they would have under his like supposed free market economy? Right? Like that, like they would still be doing the same checks. They would be presumably just as much stuff within the building that could get damaged.
Also, like, let's say you're talking about a free market, right? Aren't you just going to pick an insurance company, or aren't you just going to, if you're going to self-regulate, you're going to pay your own inspectors to come in and tell you, aren't you gonna pay people that are gonna tell you like, "Yup, everything's fine. You don't have to pay for any sort of, you know?"
Well, like
So
you can't. Well, like I think I could be like completely like give them the benefit of the doubt and say like, okay, insurance companies or regulate or not regulators, but inspectors will still have like, we can even say they wouldn't have the enforcement behind them, right? There would be no building codes. There would be no law that would be being broken, and it would be harder for people to like sue because like
and but still laws like, I don't know, you have to have a ramp for people in
yep,
wheelchairs or yeah,
like
I don't know, just the idea of businesses policing themselves though. I
yeah,
really doubt the efficacy of
yeah,
that.
I don't know, like, right? Because like like to like assume this is true, we would be like admitting that like people would arrive to the need for inspectors on their own and not be like, well, I made this building or like I trust the contractor or whatever, and they said it's good, so I trust their judgment or something like that. Like, I don't see like in what world would some random like business owner or building owner like just hire their own inspector because they want it to be inspected?
Yeah,
Like what's the point? Like the industry exists because of regulations.
yeah. It's funny. I always also think back to that time like Dave Rubin was on the Joe Rogan podcast and he said something about like regulation. And it's so funny
Oh
because Dave
yeah,
Rubin like does politics and Joe Rogan's,
he's a
but it was
bro.
just funny how Joe Rogan just sort of like, dude, I worked in construction, man. You have to have some regulations for how these guys have to do things because I mean,
As a person,
we
as a person who works in construction, I can 100% attest to that. Like, there's a
so
lot
it's
of
just so
things.
funny.
Yeah, the
And
amount
then
of
Dave
like,
Rubin's like,
yeah, 100% what Joe Rogan said was 100% true. The amount of things
yeah,
that people are like, why do we have to do this? This is so stupid, or why can't I do it this way? It's like because someone can get hurt.
mhm,
Just because it's not you doesn't mean anything.
right. And I do want to throw in there for people like, yeah, when it comes to NSA spying on people, when it comes to spending money on defense and military and overthrow, when they give subsidies to oil companies, when they just all those sort of things that the government does, like I'm sort of with libertarians like on a certain level, so like I do want to somehow connect with libertarians and show them the road to possibly one day voting for like a progressive on the left. And I think part of that is, I don't know. I think part of what Sam does here though too is like, I feel like it's just always like we're always just gonna browbeat these libertarians, and I agree, like they're so stupid, but I feel like eventually like we do need to sort of like include a platform that can kind of like get libertarians to at least vote for us over maybe like an establishment Republican, you
Mm.
know?
Uh, yeah, I think like what you actually bring up is like a good point because like I feel like there's like the reason why like I only like Sam Seder style debate only when he's going against libertarians, but that's only because like a lot of times they just like either come off with like they come off as like incredibly smug to me in a way, because it's like they have all the answers or like they can like peer into like this alternative world,
Mhm. Right.
and can
Or
just like see
yeah,
perfection and utopia. But like for me, it's
right.
like you kind of like what you're advocating for is taking away things that like were put in place because of your utopia in a way. So like That's like the one time where like I'm okay with like when Sam Seder just like goes in really fucking like hard. But
Yeah.
like in terms
Yeah,
of
you
that,
have to.
but like other than that, I think you're 100% right. His style is absolutely crap when it comes to like actually like extending an olive
Yeah.
branch.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's like because like you can kind of see it on like other issues where he would like talk to someone and he would like do the same thing and it just doesn't have the effect because like the smugness or the discrepancy just like
Yeah.
isn't there and you're like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? You are bullying this person, or like this is not how you like get an ally. This is just how you
Right.
like
Right.
blood sports, I guess, is like the thing that comes to mind because it's like you're just like wanting to like beat them in like WWE style and just like have your audience like bathe in the blood of it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone disagrees with you, they're literally like
And you
a
just have to like
horrible person.
lock yourself in there and just like
Don't
really
listen to them. Don't engage with them. They're yeah. I mean, so yeah.
And like not even like not even engaged, but just like not even like give like an seed any ground or like even just like
Yeah,
okay, so like
right,
let's say like what you're
right.
saying is true. Like
Yeah.
I think I
sure,
can like
yeah.
agree with that. Like sure, that is an issue. But this is how like I would
Yeah.
want to, right? It's
Yeah. And I also think libertarians could be a step away because they really, what they have a problem with is other more powerful institutions controlling what they can do, and I feel like there is a sort of energy there that is vibrant that you could convince on certain levels, like, okay, well, all right, maybe you disagree with us about the healthcare thing, but you know, why are you going to vote for the Republican when they're just going to do this, and that? And you know, you could say, okay, the healthcare thing, you can disagree about that, but maybe we can get you to vote for us just because the Republicans and whatever establishment Democrats, they're going to be horrible on these issues. So you should maybe go for more like a Nina Turner or like whoever, you know? It's
yeah,
tough. It's tough.
it probably is like person by person. I think I would agree that like there could definitely be like some like for instance, like I could totally see like a libertarian who prioritizes like social issues above like economic issues being able to like vote like for like a progressive Democrat or even like possibly
Yeah,
even, like a corporate
absolutely.
Democrat, right? Like
Absolutely.
it could be like I
Yeah.
could totally see like Democrats
Yeah.
like rhetoric on like the drug war like turning over like libertarians to vote for them.
Right. Let's
Or like even like
exactly, if we can
abortion
do
or
a
like marijuana. Like
marijuana, dude, exactly. There are a lot of issues. And how about even for me, I know a big one is like the NSA and the spying program that still exists. And how about Guantanamo Bay?
Yeah.
Gitmo. Yeah, and
Yeah, no,
even
there's-
the prosecution of Julian Assange.
and then,
There's a ton of libertarians.
yeah.
So,
So like there's definitely like that's definitely like where like the like progressive to libertarian or like libertarian to progressive pipeline exists or like can like start out with like the social issues and whatnot. And then like but like convincing those who are like just like they're just Republicans who like support or who like don't support abortion or
like,
like who, like,
taxation
support
is
abortion.
theft. What?
Or like
yeah,
exactly like those people like I don't
yeah, I don't know what you say.
yeah like
Right? Isn't it true? Okay, not really, but David Pakman, when he first started going to college or something, was like a libertarian for a minute. That true?
I have no idea.
Maybe I'm mixing him up with someone else, but okay, yeah. I mean, I have heard stories of people being libertarian and then
Yeah, and then just like flipping over. But then
sort of
like,
seeing like, okay, there's certain holes
seen,
in it.
I've also have seen the reverse. In 2016, I know a lot of people who were like who voted Bernie in the primary went over to like Gary Johnson and like to this day are still like libertarians. Like
So
there is
wait, but in 2016 they voted for Bernie rather than Gary Johnson?
They voted for Bernie in the primary, then went over to Gary Johnson. And they like, it was weird. And then like to this day, they like, and then like they started to like really hate Bernie and get really into like libertarian stuff. Like I know like 3 people who did that, and that like really shocked me, because like back in 2015 when the primaries were still going on, we're all like on the same side. We're like, yeah, rah rah rah. And then like literally once the primaries were over, I'm like, well, fuck. That sucked. And then like I didn't really change my beliefs, but then like all of a sudden we go away for the summer, we come back, and it's like, oh, we're libertarian now. Like it's like, what the? When did this? No, stop.
Yeah.
So like like that is like interesting how close, like just like they're close, like how close these two like ideologies like weirdly are to each other. Or like,
Yeah, in some sense, yeah, because you're actually, there's people who want to just not challenge certain injustices that are like on the institutional level, and there's some people that are just okay with a lot of things, and then there's some people that
yeah, I think
want like
it's
deep change.
I think it's possible that it's just like anti-establishment to like anti-establishment levels. Like
Yeah.
that could be like where it like exists, or where the crossover exists, and like where like maybe you can pick up certain people for your side, and then like possibly lose people from your side.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And they should be sitting there saying, how are we going to get someone on the progressive left to vote for us? Maybe we do have to change our thoughts about healthcare, or
I don't know, because like those, like the issue is, it's like that is would be like a deeply rooted like economic issue. You would have to like try to like maybe expose of like, oh, but like taxation is not the answer, or like
I would just
this
say to
whatever is
them,
not the answer.
if you're one of those libertarians that you can't even have a fire department, and maybe I won't talk to you. But once I get the libertarian who tells me, well, yeah, there should be a fire department. I mean, we should have a military. I mean, I guess you would have to tax somebody to pay for it. Then I can get you, okay, so maybe you call yourself a libertarian, but maybe there's some room, because there are some things that the government should just do in your eyes, unless you're some anarcho-capitalist, right?
Yeah, actually, you gave a better explanation of your 2 definitions of libertarians like before. Do you want to like actually like rehash that real quick, like in post show?
Well,
Like,
okay, yeah. So, I mean, there are like 2 kinds of libertarians. Me and Adam were talking about this a little bit beforehand. There's sort of the libertarian that, as kind of I just described. They believe that, and usually if I'm debating a libertarian, or just talking with a libertarian, the first thing I want to ask them is like, do you think the United States should have like a military, or do you think it should be some sort of privatized thing? Because really, when you ask that, what you're getting at is like, do you think the government should have any role in anything? And then of course, well, yeah, there should be courts. They should have a court system, and and of course, a military. We got to defend ourselves. And once they start committing to, okay, there should be an institution of government, you can sort of say, okay, so you can sort of break it down like, okay, you are accepting that the government should have some responsibilities. And I think those are libertarians. They call themselves libertarians, and I'm sure in this amorphous world where definitions mean all different things, like I'm sure they could be a libertarian, but I think we could really speak to people like that.
I mean, technically, you and I are both social libertarians. Like
Right?
every single
Or
like
yeah, or
every
I've heard the term
political,
civil libertarian.
yeah, every political. Personally, I think I'd probably just be like more identified as like a social liberal or like social democrat. But like yeah, like every, but like there is definitely like with large swaths of like any political ideology or definition, there's so many different like examples, because like as nice as like these broad definitions are, they aren't perfect, and you will never get a perfect definition that will like have everyone in your group who 100% agrees with you, because humans are just so unique, are just so unique and individualized, and that is awesome. That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with that. That even though the political definitions thing, it's annoying when because the words start to mean totally different things
And
to
like
different people.
the worst part is that when like a lot of people have preconceived notions of a specific group of people. So like when you do start to like go off, like you sometimes end up like erasing somebody's humanity sometimes. Where like you're not listening to them, you already have like a preconceived notion of what they're going to say, and you already have something just laying like right in the back of your head ready to go. And no matter what they say or how they say
Yeah,
it or
right,
why they may say it,
right,
you're just gonna say whatever
right.
your like preconceived, like,
Mhm.
which is unfortunate part of like political discourse nowadays,
Yeah.
which has
If
actually
someone
always
says I
existed.
am a libertarian, then people go, okay, well then I hate you. You
Right.
know, like I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Like, and everyone's guilty of it. Like, because
absolutely.
that is because definition that is what definitions do, and it's the
And
positive
right,
side
we
of
have that
definitions,
natural way of just grouping
people
people and
together and whatnot. And sometimes we can lose the individual when we try to group a lot of people together when we like create a group, like, which sucks and has been like one thing. Or like I feel like in the past year I've really started, I don't know if it's just like because I'm just getting older or whatnot, but like I've just like really started to be like, okay, let's focus on like the individual or whatever. Like
right.
I feel like I've gotten like more individualistic, but like still want like collectivist outcomes in a way.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, just like random
It's
thoughts that have been popping in my head, or like I'm just like, yeah, this is a value for me. I don't know how this came to be, but like I want that. This is what I want, and this is what I want to like spread throughout the world. Like let's
I
work together,
remember
but like let's respect each other's like autonomy.
I remember one time like I just met like through work. There was this kid who was really into politics and we started becoming friends and one time he asked me, he was like, because we talked about politics and stuff a lot. He
Mm-hmm.
was on the right. And one time he asked me, he's like, "Well, what are you? Like, what are you? What are you? Are you a social democrat? Are you, or just he meant like, are you a Keynesian? Like, what are you?" He was, I don't know, and he wanted me to give like these terms. Well, I'm a Keynesian. I'm a social democrat. He wanted like not in so many words, but he was asking me like, what are the box that I can
Yeah,
put
that
you
you
in?
can.
And then I can look up a bunch of other people who say that they're that, and I could see their opinions. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's just like, no, I'm a nothing, dude. I'm
Mm-hmm.
me. I'm not even putting a label on that. Like,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I remember it's actually funny because I used to be like very against like labels. Then like I think like around like 2016, I'm just like, okay, screw it. I'm just gonna accept the progressive label or like the social democrat label.
mhm.
But like definitely like last year when I started having the idea of like the individualist of that like change in mind, like is when I really started to go like, you know what? Maybe I was right when I was younger, and labels are just completely stupid and just aren't worth it
Yeah,
because you would
yeah,
actually say, like even going back to like Sam Seder and seeing like half of his libertarian debates, they'd have to like spend so much time saying, "Well, I'm a libertarian, but I'm not this type of libertarian." And you see it with like
right,
today, you see a lot of similarities with socialists, where it's like, "Well,
right,
I'm this type of socialist, not these other types of
right,
socialists," or "These other socialists
right.
aren't actually socialists," or "They don't really fit into like my definition of socialism," or "Their type of
Yeah,
socialism is completely misguided," and you're just like,
yeah. That is so
"Why?"
true. That is so true. Every time you debate an ideology and someone's just a defender of like this word,
Yep. And remember, anyone who is to the tiniest bit right of you is a neoliberal shill.
that happens way too often.
That's
That happens way too often.
it's hilarious because like now it's like okay, well, it seems like neoliberal is the new social democrat on the internet. Like it's insane. Where it's like it's so far removed from like the Thatcher Reagan definition that it used to be.
Or also I see a lot too people just say, "Oh, you're a right winger. You've crossed through
Oh,
neoliberalism.
anyone who's a capitalist is a right winger. Like, if you're not for
Yeah.
abolishing like all like Jesus Christ, if you're not for like forcing people to have like worker-owned co-ops all the time, like you are the evil right winger. It's like, what?
Or even you see it too, and I agree. Yeah, exactly. Like if you don't want to co-op, you're a right winger. That's so crazy. But you even see it like the other way, where like, oh, if people have like certain criticisms
Oh
of like
yeah.
AOC
Oh
or
my gosh.
something, it's like, well, you're a right winger. It's like the people are criticizing a lot of
And then
times
like
from the left position.
it's so sad because they stole it from the right. They stole it from
So
the right.
yeah.
Anyone who is slightly to the left of it, like you see it with Romney getting called like a socialist apologist sometimes by like certain like
Oh,
right wing talk show. Like
yo,
Jesus Christ, it's like, are you
dude.
serious?
And dude, I'm getting it's really weird when especially I listen to a lot of Republican radio on my way into work in the morning,
Oh, I used to do
and
that when I was younger.
they talk like Biden the Marxist and
Yep,
Biden the communist.
yep.
It's just
It's
like,
like, who
oh
is this
my
radical
God.
bi? Okay,
Oh my God, he's a Marxist.
dude,
Like,
I'm an anarcho Bidenist. Thank you very much.
it's
Oh
like
my
what
God, the
could
best part was the Obama years. There was this one person who like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama both liked, Saul Lewinsky.
Mhm.
Oh God, Saul Lundy. Oh my God, I forget who he is. He was a very like influential like liberal of like the '60s and the '70s. So like kind of
Right.
before like Obama's and Hillary's time. But
Hmm.
every single time, like you would hear like an Obama credit, you'd be like, well, of course he was like taught by this radical Marxist solo, and it's just like, and the radical left hold him up to like a high pedestal, and I'm like, as I'm listening to this, I like consider myself on the left, and I'm like aware of like most of the thinkers of like the modern day left, and I'm like, who the hell is this person?
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then like the oh my God, it's insane.
Yeah, and it happens. I think there's even other points like beyond just like political definitions like terrorism. Like what is terrorism?
Yeah,
Um
well, I mean,
what
I would
is
say that those are also political definitions in a way.
yeah, or even like racism. What is
Yeah,
racism?
racism. Oh my gosh, yeah. Um, I don't like the.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
words like beyond just political affiliations in
like I
politics.
feel like for the like there is like a movement to like kind of like rechange like what racism is in a way. I'm not gonna. I forget exactly how they're gonna change it, but like I didn't really like it. Because it was like really like adding more power to the word when like I feel like in my opinion that word has like it doesn't do enough as a word. I feel like because there's like a type of racism that like I feel like a lot of people do exhibit, which is like a passive racism, where it's like you may be doing a certain action that like may actually be heavily race based or like may actually be like very offensive to like other types of people who are not of your skin color, right? And so like I call it like a very like passive level of like racism. Um, Technically, that would be like these actions are racist, but to really literally call these things the same thing as like burning a cross, using the same word
Sure,
to
yeah.
describe like a very like maybe passive action of like
Yeah.
I can't think of an
Yeah.
example of like
No, no, I got you. I got you. Like maybe like you see two homeless guys on the street and you only have $1 in your pocket and there's or whatever. Like I don't know, like yeah, to say like that's the same
yeah
as like burning a
maybe like
cross.
9 out of 10 times you would like give it to like the person of your same skin color. Yeah, sure, that would be like like
Yeah,
you
like
may not be actively doing it, you may just be like
yeah,
that just might be happening, but like you're not actively doing it, right? That's definitely
right.
not the same as like
Right. No,
gearing
I
up in the
agree.
KKK, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
I agree with you. And also, like, at the same time, you look at terrorism, like, there's Al Qaeda, and then there's, like, I don't know, Edward Snowden,
yeah,
or like, You know, it's like, what is a terrorist? Then I guess and if you look at the definition of terrorism, literally everybody is a terrorist. Like,
Yeah. And like I think I'm okay with like the definition of like a non-state actor doing it or whatever, and it's just like, okay, sure. Like because like I agree with you right now, the definition is like super broad.
and yeah, and like at the same time, it's like you have to, and it's not like you can say, okay, this word has gotten too messed up, like we're just gonna get rid of this word. Like, it's one of those things, even though we can say, yo, this is really bad that all these people have all these different views on what these words mean, but at the
Mm.
same time, like, well, we all have to still, this is how it has to be.
We still need these
And
like these words still have importance to them because like that's how language works, right? We need to like identify like we need to be able to communicate certain ideas or like certain like forms to each other, and that's where the words come into. So like
right.
sure. I think like really sometimes like when someone like oh god, am I really okay. So like technically terrorism may or may not always be bad per se. There could be good instances of terrorism. So, like for instance, in South Africa, I would say during apartheid, that group was labeled as like a terrorist group by the government of South Africa. We can go back to like my favorite example would be the American Revolution. The Boston Tea Party was absolutely an act of terrorism, or would be considered an act of terrorism by any state.
Yeah.
It's very important to like evaluate these actors and figure out like okay, what's like driving these actions, what are they standing for. um like you could technically side with terrorists, but like don't
Could
be
you call what they're doing in Israel terrorism? Could you call like what the CIA does all over the world terrorism?
yeah, and
In certain
technically
definitions, if you're gonna call like Trotsky a terrorist or something like that,
yeah,
um,
like
yeah, then I don't see how those people aren't.
it's like one of those things where it's just like yeah, it's never done by like the best actors of or right or like actors who like the actions that like they do are usually never really that good in a way, or like are never like preferable or never the preferred situation, which is why like I think there's always is like a negative connotation to it. um Rightly so, because like unfortunately like the society isn't perfect, and so it's like unfortunate when people have to do bad things in a society. And granted, I would also say there are definitely like terrorists like Al Qaeda out there that are freaking monsters, and ISIS that are just
And
like
like you
monsters.
said, and like you
And we can
said, like
evaluate what their actions are, what they're fighting for, and what is driving them. And you can like say like, yeah, that is a bad like they are using terrorism for like an evil in a way. I don't support those terrorists. But then like we can go back to South Africa. It's like, okay, they're fighting deep racial inequality that is existing in that nation, and they are literally being stole from, like having their lives stole from them. Like
so yeah, okay.
it's
If you're fighting for a good cause, then it's not terrorism.
and that's well, like I would still call it terrorism. Like I would bite the bullet and say,
Okay, you still
yeah,
would call it
I
terrorism.
like I'd be like for instance, if a person's like, I'm not going to deny it, like what their actions are doing are preferable, right?
So maybe it's not always that a
It's not
terrorist is
always
necessarily the worst human scum on the earth.
right. Like
Maybe there's a situation
it could
where
be
the
that like who
terrorist
they're
could mean
fighting
that
is
you're George
worse.
Washington, you're a terrorist against
The British
the
king.
British government.
You are, yeah. Like this is true.
So
Like
he should be a proud. Okay,
like
yeah, yeah.
like again, right? Like one person's rebels is another person's patriot, like or revolutionary. Like that's the complex world that we live in. We shouldn't necessarily be so quick to like attribute like morality to like terms in a way, because technically the actions of what they're doing you may or may not agree with. But I would also say be very careful when you like try to bite that bullet and like say like, yeah, I will defend this terrorist group because that it looks really bad. to like audiences who may not know.
Like, yeah, if you had defended the rebel, the founding fathers terrorist group, I
Yeah.
mean, you can defend once you expand the definition like that,
Yeah.
then right, you can defend the terrorist in South Africa, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Like
yeah, it's mhm.
it's just like up to like again like look at the individuals, look at what they're fighting for and what they stand for, and like what is their end goal, right? Okay,
But
so their
and
end goal,
but
like with the founding fathers, their end goal was their own sovereign state, independence from a colonial nation. Hell yeah.
and And so that's why I think, yeah, when it really is one of those things where it's like you just have to look at it on a case by case basis, that is why you do get like all those frustrating like discrepancies with the usage
And
of these words.
yeah, and that is like because like these words and like I feel like even just like my attitude around these words where it's just like I am like nervous really saying, yeah, terrorism can be good. I don't like saying that. I really don't, but like at the same time I feel like I have like no other.
Boston Tea Party. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
well but that's
because like that
because
word is
right,
so
the meaning of
powerful,
these
right?
words because it means Al Qaeda. At the same time, it could mean ISIS and Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And like we're
so
using the same word to describe these groups and it's like
and
technically
that
and
and that
like to
is
get
the
super
conundrum.
pedantic, it's like technically yes.
Right. And so that's the world we live in, and I think we should move on
To
to our
another
next
terrorist
topic.
organization that is absolutely bad. The statue of Robert E. Lee being taken down. The leader of the terrorist group that tried to secede from the Union in order to keep slavery.
Right, they were the terrorist
See, I
group,
can evaluate that terrorist group and say,
and then it was and I'm sure on a certain level, like, all right, it's somebody who like commits a political violence. So then the Union, it was also a terrorist group.
well, I would say like I literally just like throw in like, okay, was it a state or was it not a state? Like I feel
They
like
were
state.
terrorizing the southern states into forcing them to be a part of the Union, and they were terrorists.
Well,
So
no, they weren't because they were a state actor. They just didn't recognize the southern states as a state.
if you look up the actual definition of terrorism,
I
it
know,
would
but like
literally fit.
that's my personal distinction that kind of like really is like
Okay.
that's personally for me. I because I feel like that does help give like the word like more of a concise meaning.
Hmm.
Because like typically that is how that word is like attributed to like other to like groups and organizations, right? Like
That it has to be.
well, not that it has to be, but like it just like happens to be that like most terrorist groups out there aren't also like heads of their own state in a way, or like heads of recognized states.
So that you can't be or you should be or you can't be the head of the state if you're a terrorist. Is that what you're saying?
Um,
Or you have to be.
it can't be. If I were to change the definition, so or like I would say recognized state would be where I would put into it.
Okay. I mean,
That would right because states have their own sovereign rights and whatnot, and it gets a lot more
yeah,
complicated. When you
okay.
put
I
on.
see that. That's certainly a way that you could separate what's happening in Israel and the CIA and the Union and the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah,
But was the Boston Tea Party though the head of the state
no,
or that
like I would
no,
say the
so
British Empire didn't recognize the Boston Tea Party as an official state, and like really like no country and like no country.
so
would,
that
like,
was
official- yeah.
I guess a terrorist act.
Yeah. And there was no official state when the Boston Tea Party was going out. Like it was like the beginning, right? There was no like Continental Congress at the time. Like, oh boy.
Okay, I mean, I didn't have the same definition as you, but maybe
Look, I
hearing
think I
that,
might be working.
maybe I'd be open to adopting something like that.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
I don't know. That's the only way I can like square certain circles without just everyone being a terrorist state.
All right. For the sake of brevity here.
Yeah, I was not expecting that conversation.
So yeah, the whole thing with taking down statues, Adam,
Yeah,
your
so
take on that.
right, the statue in general was of Robert E. Lee. This helped spark the whole Charlestown situation in which Heather Heyer ended up dying back in 2017, and this was the famous march of like the Proud Boys coming in with they will not replace us. Jews will not replace us is what they were inferring or explicitly say. And the thing with like the statues is really, really hard in a way, because on like one hand, kind of like with what I would say with like, there's no like clear-cut solution, right? Because like I am all for like taking down Confederate statues, but you lose me when you go for like maybe people like George Washington or David Hume. Yeah, David Hume. Who are people who are not known for their slavery or were not remembered for protecting the rights of slaves. Or for the right to hold slaves, not protecting the right of slaves. Oh my gosh.
But here's the thing. I feel like it's not going to be the kind of situation we're going to only remove certain statues. I do have this sense that we're going to be rooting for them when they take down the Robert E. Lee statue, and then we're going to realize, oh my God, what have we done?
Look,
when they do take down those statues that you're talking about of Hume.
So like, and like, yeah, like these are already like started, especially. But so like here would be like my response to that. I believe in humans. First off, like a lot of these like statue protests are like very much local issues, right? So if you don't like a statue in your town square, I totally okay with like you getting people together, going down to like your local officials and like trying to push them to get rid of these statues if this is a very strong issue for you and other people in your community. If it's like, for instance, for like Confederate statues, absolutely, like I would say I would be like with you like 100% of the time. If it's for like others, but like you would like then start to lose me like as we get like closer and closer to like people who have had like messed up views for our time now, but like in the past were like probably like super progressive. And I would just trust that people, and like this is kind of like where we would go back to like the marketplace of ideas, where it's just like, okay, well, like let's have like a discussion, or like I think like you people who want to like remove like all of these statues are like in the vast minority, a very vocal but minor, but like a very vocal minority. And so like, yeah, sure, I would be for like, you would like lose my support as you go. I don't. God, that's a jumbled mess of a thought.
I think one thing for me is that the statue issue, you know, Andrew Jackson's on the $20 bill, the Trail of Tears. I'm so against all that stuff, but it's just funny when like I'll see like Don Lemon's show on CNN, and the whole and all the talking heads are talking about statues, and I always get this feeling, and I actually heard this really cool. I'm quoting someone. I'm not just coming up with this. I'm quoting someone I heard on a podcast, and I can't remember who it is right now, but they said something like, imagine if you're walking through like Newark, or you know, you're walking through the city and you see a homeless man, and there's two people, right? The one guy who walks past the homeless man who, he recognizes like his privilege, and he recognizes how maybe the color of his skin has allowed certain advantages that are subconscious. And then you have a second guy who walks past him who, oh, that guy, he should just get a job. He should have worked hard. They totally look down on them. And so at the same time, you're just having two people walk past a homeless man. So it really, nothing gets any better for homeless man. And I think really, like, there's such a pseudo debate like about like conquering racism in this country, because taking down statues doesn't change anything. And really, to really do this, you would have to have big, bold policy. And yeah, we can talk about the statues, and I don't like Robert E. Lee and I don't like Andrew Jackson, and sure, but for me that just doesn't do anything. For me, yeah. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so I would say I would disagree. Where like I think policy is important, but like there is maybe like some right. So like while like these statues don't necessarily represent like a material benefit that like say like a housing plan for homeless people would be, right? I would never say that like this is probably like these statues require as immediate attention as like those issues should. But I really do think that if you do need to like stomp out like levels of racism in the society, I honestly think having statues that represent like literally a state that wanted to be that founded on like one of its key principles was on slavery is probably a good way to help get racism out of
Yeah.
your society.
Yeah,
right?
I'm
Like,
I'm totally in agreement with you. I'm
that's
totally in agreement with you.
right, and that's where it's like these groups, these people, this is their issue in a way, right? This is a very big hot button issue for them, right? You may not agree that that should be an issue for them, but like it or not, these talking heads are talking about this because people are making these movements or are like making waves like around these issues. And so when the time comes to have the discussion, we should probably have the discussion. Should we have statues that commemorate people who were traitors to this nation? One, outside of like federal halls or outside like federal buildings or state buildings. And two, people who fought and died, people for the benefit to have a slave, to own another human being that represent a vast portion of like the population down there.
Yeah, yeah, but and then again, like, I just don't know how you can say that, and then you can also say, well, George Washington,
Well,
if there's
yeah,
a
sure.
statue of him.
What was George Washington remembered for?
So it's just about what the historians
Like what it mean?
have
Well, like,
bestowed upon your memory,
no, not
I guess.
necessarily, but like
Like,
what are like what
he's
are the
known.
actions like what are the actions that like Jefferson Davis's claim to fame? Literally seceding from the Union. What are the actions of George
And there's not.
Washington? Literally creating the Union.
Is it so
for,
wrong to secede from the Union? No, the thing
when the
that's
basis
wrong.
is slavery? Yes.
But yeah, but
This is like the January 6th riots again.
but George
Technically, what they did it shouldn't be a right that you
Okay,
should take
but
away,
but
but
here's the thing.
you don't agree with them. Sorry.
George Washington, right? Like, isn't he seceding from a place that has way more progressive views about slavery than they do? And I don't know if the two situations are that far off. Like, I'm not saying like yeah, aren't they sort of seceding to keep their own way of doing things? And one of those things is slavery, which England ends slavery way before the Americas do, and those ideas take place there way more frequently because there's not this vast amount of farmland that can be cultivated by slaves. So it's more industry where they would hire like
So
workers rather than having slaves.
so in England itself, like first off, you're right. England has actually like a weird stuff, like a very good record when it comes to like ending slavery and like the slave trade like throughout its empire. Like honestly, for like as like a moral imperative, like England deserves like a lot of credit for the actions that they took. Alternatively, they also could have ended slavery in the colonies like a lot sooner if they wanted. They ended the slave trade or like the new importations of certain slaves. But in terms of like owning slaves itself, like this was just never really something that like was ever decreed or anything. And I would say that like Washington's diaries hardly ever mention the fight for the people or for the nation as being one founded upon slavery or for the right to own slaves or for the
You,
right. It's
you're
usually
right
based
that
around the
I'm
ideas.
reaching a little bit. I'm reaching a little bit to draw this comparison. It's not great, but
Look, like I think it's like sure you can technically if you wanted to you can probably like you can say and that's kind of like where the people who want to say like take down all the statues come in line, right? Where they say, well, Washington owns slaves. Washington isn't a perfect being. I agree, he's not. I don't like Washington because of his slaves. I said like again, this is something I said last time, right? Washington would have been a lot cooler if he let his slaves go free before he died and not wait till after he died.
let me ask you this. Go ahead, finish your.
Yeah. I forget. So, ask
So
away.
so let's say there is a place in Oklahoma
Mm-hmm.
and they have a statue, and the people in that town, the majority of them like the statue and want the statue. Do you think that statue should be taken down?
Do I think it should be taken
And it's
down?
and it's a Confederate general or
Do
something.
I think it should be taken down? Yes. Um, would I like want action to take it down? Probably not. No. Because, like I
Okay.
said, I think these are like a lot of these statues are very hyper localized issues. And while I
Okay.
think
That's fair.
yeah, like I have no right to say like fuck. Like no. I don't think that like the federal government should force these because again, I think that would just be like a waste of time and resources and
Yeah. Yeah. So I think actually I think we're really on the same exact page on this.
mhm.
Yeah. And if people in their towns start agreeing with us that
Like
these statues are offensive,
this is where
then
the marketplace of ideas
and
comes in, right? Like if
yeah.
like I'm
And
sure
so
like
right,
it's not
getting the word
100%.
out there.
Yeah, it's not 100% of people in that town and like this can also come in through like education and whatnot. Like probably what I would want to like prefer would be like a nationalized education system that could a more federalized education system. So that way we don't have like two different accounts of the Civil War depending on like which parts of like the country you're in. Like for instance, the fact that like some schools in the South teach it as the War of Northern Aggression. The fuck?
Yeah. Yeah.
No. Like
Yeah. I think we need major education reform as well.
and and I think honestly like that could be like one huge step to actually like solving racism in a way. Um because just like making sure that you don't have like region specific history because like you are right or like with our like discussion earlier of how like how certain phrases certain terminologies are characterized or can be used to like characterize like different groups of people to either like purposely paint them in a negative light or whatnot.
At the end of the day, right? Like when we educate these people, it's in like with that education, like that's not the end. That's just the means to the end. But really the end would be that eventually the government adopts policy that
Right, but I would
that
want that to
helps
be like,
people.
yeah, yeah, and that would then in turn be shown through like a local action or a local group of this coming of like people like they being like, oh my gosh, wait, why do we have Confederate soldiers? Like, oh, that's what these people were doing. They weren't fighting for state right. Oh, that's the rights that they were like trying to defend. Oh, that's not good. We should probably not have these guys. And like honestly,
Okay.
yeah, and like the one thing like I would say is like I'm okay with having these people, or like if you want to like move these statues for like the history, because like I think that's like one thing that we never touched upon in this argument, because like I know like some of my family members like their like reaction to it is not like, oh, protect the statues, but they fear for history or whatever, or like a mob coming to like take away history, and like that's always like something where it's like I'm like, yeah, sure, as a person who loves history, it's like that is a valid fear. um like, and if you want to have like a
Yeah,
Civil
sure.
War museum and like have
Sure,
like
but
a
you
garden
wouldn't just have a statue of
and
Hitler,
like,
right?
yeah, right,
There's got to be someone who
and
you
also like you
is
don't get
vile
your
enough not
history,
to have a statue of, right?
and like you don't get your history from fucking statues. You don't.
Right.
Um, but like, you know what? If that's like your way to like get like a local museum that could maybe have like a museum of like the Civil War, in which you have like a garden where you have like a bunch of like Confederate statues and Union statues and whatnot for people to go in and say like, this is what these people looked like or whatever and who they fought with. Like, I'd be okay with that. That's an educational environment.
Sure.
That's like for the purpose of like advancing people's knowledge, I would hope, and not just being used as state propaganda to subjugate black people, like what a lot of those statues were initially set up to do.
Okay. Yeah, I really can't argue with you. I
I,
really can't argue with you on any of that. It's I'm with you.
okay. Do you have anything else to say about the topic?
Yeah, so I think that should do it for tonight, folks. Thank you for listening. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, and also check us out on wherever you
Get your
listen to your podcasts.
Google's podcast, Spotify. Want to listen to us on your drive to work? Go right ahead. We're there. It's easy. You just have to connect it.
Thank you for listening, and have a good night.